All right. And I'll be recording this session and we'll be sending you a copy of the recording along with some additional resources later this afternoon. So just wanted to go over a couple of things in case you were not aware, but to start off with, to actually access Respondus, you would go into your course and go to Lockdown Browser. And when you get there, there's a lot of really good resources on this introduction page, including video tutorials, which we highly recommend that you watch these tutorials. There's a student overview that's great that you could share with students, along with some additional video tutorials. Then there's a Getting Started tab, and this is one of the things that we have seen that some professors have skipped over a few steps to go ahead and launch Respondus, but it recommends that you watch those videos. Then some information for your syllabus, which we'll talk about classic quizzes versus new quizzes a little bit later. And then the importance of running a practice quiz for students to take before they actually take it. And then some additional resources as well. So all of those are on the welcome page, but I'm gonna go ahead and get into Lockdown Browser. So you're going to start off by creating your Canvas quiz or a test exactly like you would in Canvas. You set it up with your questions, what you're wanting students to answer. Then once you set it up, you'll come to Lockdown Browser to choose the settings. And we're gonna go over some of the settings that we recommend for you all. So I'm just going to use this example quiz here in this faculty training course. And obviously, if you're not using Lockdown Browser, and I give this caveat, it's not required to use Lockdown Browser. A lot of people are wanting to use it, especially with us going and doing complete remote for finals at the end of the semester, but it's optional on if you want to use it or not. It's not a university requirement that you use it. For example, the grad class I teach for College of Ed, I'm not going to need it for the type of final kind of assessment they have in that course. Same thing with my Lipscomb Experience class. So I'm not using it in those two classes. But if you need to for your classes, then this is a great tool for you to use. So I'm going to select Require Respondus Lockdown Browser for this exam. Now, the very first thing that you'll see is this is checked. And we recommend that you uncheck it because if you do not uncheck this, where it says View Feedback and Results, in Canvas, if you check that students can view their results immediately after completing the quiz, this is checked, it's not going to let them see their results. So we recommend that you uncheck that, that you do not have that, because you're wanting to use Canvas to really see the results and the feedback, not Lockdown Browser. The other setting is the password setting. It will automatically generate some type of access code based on Canvas, but you don't necessarily need it. It is optional. And for the most part, there's going to be one exception that we'll talk about in just a little bit. For the most part, we recommend not even having an access code because when students start Lockdown Browser, they have to log in to Canvas using their Lipscomb credentials. So it is, there's nothing special about that access code that prevents that from them, being able to log in. And so one of the things that we tell people, if you choose to use an access code, you will need to communicate that with students before the test begins, because they will not be able to get into the test if you've not shared it. But our recommendation for the most part, except for one instance, which we'll talk about in a minute, is just to go ahead and leave that blank as well. Then you'll get into some advanced settings for Lockdown Browser settings. And the Lockdown Browser is the one that it just locks down everything. Students can't access anything. A lot of, this is what we used to have in Blackboard many years ago when we had a lockdown browser, we did not have the monitor piece. And you know, with this, like I said, it locks them in. So with the advanced settings, I'm going to share the ones that we recommend first. The very first one we recommend is that you select allow students to use this exam with an iPad. Some students, they you know, may have an iPad that they can use, and if they don't, like, if they can't access it with an iPad, they may not be able to get in and use the test. We'll talk about what systems you can use for the test a little bit later. And the reason why we also select that one is if students have issues, our library is working on getting the iPads in the library set up where students can check them out to be able to take tests. And IT was just showing us they have at least 4 of them ready to go at this point, and hopefully by the end of the week up to 9 of those iPads ready that students can check out and take their test using the iPad. You also, a recommendation, if you are having students to go to specific websites or domains, then you'll need to be able to put that in here. If you don't, students aren't able to access those particular web domains. So if there is like an electronic textbook or some other resource that you need students to access, then you're going to need to put it in there. Other than that, if it's not in there, they can't access it, and it's going to lock them into Canvas only. It won't let them go into anything else. Calculator. If you want them to be able to utilize the calculator on the toolbar, we recommend that you select that. There's a standard calculator, and there's also a scientific calculator. So if they're doing some like really technical stuff, you may want to select the scientific calculator. So these are the 3 that we recommend. Now, if you don't have any other web domains that you need them to access, then you don't have to check that, or you're not having them use a calculator, you don't have to have that one checked as well, but definitely the one with an iPad in case there are any students. Now, this first one, the first one and the last one are the 2 that we recommend that you do not check. So let's talk about this first one, the lock students into the browser until the exam is completed. What this means is that if there is some interruption of some sort, it will prevent students from exiting the browser until the exam is completed. So like if there's some type of emergency situation, let's say that they're taking it in their dorm room and they have to evacuate the dorm, or there's a Wi-Fi outage, not that we've ever had any of those around here lately, or the power goes out or anything like that. If you check that, then the students are not going to be able to leave that exam and then possibly come back to finish it up. So we highly recommend, I actually saw this from a professor who gave Respondus literally the day after we got everything into Canvas, and a student got taken out of Canvas and the quiz when that time, it was that Friday afternoon when the Wi-Fi was going out because they were updating something. So the instructor had to go in and give that student another attempt for them to be able to complete the exam. So one of the cool things about this is that if students like go to leave an exam, it will prompt them to speak into the microphone to tell you why that they are leaving. Like, you know, oh, I have to evacuate the dorm right now, or, you know, something like that. The other setting that we recommend that you do not check is the enable printing from the toolbar. If you enable it, then they can print the exam questions right there and have them. I'm not really sure why you might want that, because if it is a student who has an accommodation and they have a written, then you're already going to provide a copy to the accessibility office and go through them for the testing center. You're not going to have them be printing it from the toolbar. So that is the other advanced setting that we do not recommend. So on those advanced settings, the iPad, if you have specific domains, and the calculator are the ones that we recommend. Now, I'm going to stop right here to see if you have any questions before we move on. All right. Thumbs up if we're good to go. All right. Thank you. So this is what is needed for the lockdown browser, and just, making sure that students are locked down into the browser. The second piece is if you're wanting to use Respondus Monitor to use the webcam to monitor students' settings. Some people, they may do lockdown browser, but they don't have Respondus Monitor, and they truly trust their students that they're not going to be talking to anybody at all, which is fabulous. Other people, you may want to select require Respondus Monitor, which is going to require the webcam. Now we're going to start by going over this startup sequencing. This is what happens before the webcam session begins. What I really like about all of this is that you are able to preview and see what students see as well. So you're able to kind of go through and see, okay, this is what students will be able to see. You will see 2 of these are grayed out. We cannot change those at all. This is where it will do a system check for the webcam, and also the facial detection check. So this is required in order to use the Respondus Monitor, so we can't change anything in there. All of these are really good. We recommend that you keep all of these on here. The things that we do recommend is that you edit the text for additional instructions and maybe the environment check as well. So for example, I'm going to use Amy on here since we have a math teacher. If she's allowing 2 pieces of scratch paper for them to use during the test, then she can, in this additional instructions, tell them the resources that they can have with them while they're taking the test. So you can have additional scratch paper, you can have your own calculator to use. If you're allowing them to use a book for some reason, they can have the book. So you can go in and edit the text and put in those additional instructions that you want to share with students that they may need. This is what Respondus already has in there, but like I said, you can go and edit and save it to what fits your particular exam. And it's great because you may change depending on your exam. So one exam you may require, or you may allow open book, the other exam you may not. So you can edit those as needed. The other thing is the environment check. And so you can give some specific instructions for students when it's getting ready to do the environment check of like, I want you to hold up your 2 pieces of scratch paper so we're able to see that there's nothing on your scratch paper before you begin. So you can kind of clarify that for students as well. Let's see. So any questions about the startup sequence? Like I said, it's pretty self-explanatory. You'll see the preview for all of those, and then you'll just want to edit the text to give the documentation that you may want. Now, there are 2 settings underneath facial detection options. This one, we recommend that, if, let's see, I'm gonna find my paper here. Okay, we recommend that you keep this one checked, and that it will not allow students to start the exam if the face cannot be detected in the startup sequence. So this one, we recommend that you keep checked. This one, if you have students using other resources like scratch paper, a calculator, a textbook, something like that, then we recommend that you do not check it, because what will happen is they'll be down looking and working, and there will be an alert that flashes that says we cannot detect your face right now. And if they're not looking at that, then they're going to totally miss that, and it's going to flag it for you, and you're going to have all these red flags in the results that you may not need there. Now, if you're not using any other resources, everything is right there in Canvas in front of them, then you can check that and it will let them like, oh, all of a sudden, like your face is covered, you know, we recommend that you don't wear a hat, things like that. And it, you know, it will kind of alert them of like, we can't really see your face right now. So like I said, if you are using additional resources, do not check this one, but check it if you're just using what's there. Then advanced settings. These are a couple of optional ones. Now, allow another application to use the microphone during this exam. This one right here is one that, because it will only pick up one microphone at a time, like whenever you're in lockdown browser. So the example that they shared is if there's like an some type of audio response on an exam, then you may want to check that if students have to use the microphone for like something that they need to do in Canvas. The example they used was if students had like a foreign language class and students had to speak something into the exam, then to check that. It may be something, Donna, with music or something that you may have, yeah, I don't know, depending on your exam, but that may be something that you want the students to be able to use a microphone if that other application is in there. Other than that, you don't need to check it. And then this one right here, make webcam videos available for viewing out loud 24 hours. So if you're wanting to look at the results on your, like a mobile device, you're using like the Canvas teacher app, instead of maybe using your laptop with the browser, then you would check this make web, you know, if you're like, oh, I want to be able to use my app that I have. It will take 24 hours to process that because that's an additional thing that they're going to make that available. But if you are just going to pull up Canvas on your regular laptop browser or your desktop browser, then I wouldn't worry about that particular setting. This last setting right here, enter a demo student username for use by the instructor. This is something that really doesn't pertain to us using Canvas. This is for like when we used to have Blackboard, we could create a test student that actually had a username and a password that we could sign in to the class that way. So just totally ignore this enter a demo student because our test students that we have in our classes, they don't have any passwords to be able, you know, we don't have a password to be able to have them log into Canvas that way. So we can't really use this particular feature. Any questions about facial detection or advanced settings for the Respondus monitor? We're good. Okay, I like seeing thumbs ups here. All right, trying to get all of you all on one screen on my end. Okay, the other piece is that I'm going to come back to is the use either Respondus monitor or a Proctored lab to take the exam. Now, this would be a situation, let's say that you have cohorted your class and half of your class will be in person taking an exam with you and half the class will be taking the exam remote. Then you could select this option. This is where you'll see there's a note that students will need an access code. So you'll need to put in an access code that you're going to be able to share with those students who are in person the day that they take the exam. So we'll just say, Go Bisons is my access code. So I'm going to put it in for my password settings. And then what will happen if I select this, you know, all of these other things will be, you know, available just like the settings I just did. But what will happen is when students get ready to take the exam, it will pop up on a screen. And I really wish we had the screen so we could actually demo it, but we don't. It'll say, do you have an access code for this exam? And if they select yes, this is for those that are in person, and you will share with them, this is what you type in right now to access. So it might be Go Bisons or math is fun, or, you know, science rocks, or, you know, whatever you want the password to be. So students enter in that access code and they can immediately take it. It's not using the webcam or anything, because you are saying that you're going to be the one proctoring them in the actual classroom setting. Now, when they get on there and you have this set up, and let's just say that they don't have an access code, then it will prompt them to go through this webcam setup for those who don't have the access code. So either you have the access code because you're in class, or you have the webcam code or the webcam check because you're taking it remote. We've had a couple of instructors who have already done this, because they went ahead and had the half the class come to the physical classroom, and they had the access code that they shared with students in the classroom, and they just walked around and monitored while students took it on their own device. And then the students who were remote went through and had the webcam proctor, and then it's able to flag anything that they might, you know, seem suspicious through Respondus. So that may be an option for you as well. If you're having everyone complete the test remotely, then I would just go ahead and do the require Respondus monitor for this exam, and it will automatically do the webcam check for them. But if you're doing the cohorting, then you can, you know, select it, have the same information there, and then have the access code for those in the classroom. Questions about this? I think this is kind of cool to help with kind of that cohorting, and to hey, I'm going to be the one kind of proctoring it, because you don't really want everyone in the actual, if you have people in the physical classroom have their webcams going, because, you know, if you're walking around or anything monitoring, then it may flag that particular student. So I really like that there's that option available. Questions, comments? We have a super advanced group. Awesome, I love it. Well, like I said, we have a handout that we'll send to you as soon as we have this recording, that also talks through every single one of these, and it will say recommended or not recommended for all of these settings as well from the CTL. So we have that available for you. All right, so I'm gonna, yes, Donna. You're still muted.
I was having trouble unmuting. Okay. If you're through with what you're going to tell us, I have kind of a something that I have my students do, and they for part of their test, they work on paper and then they upload that file. So what usually happens is they will use a scanning program on their phone, and then they'll get that to their computer and upload it. Is that process going to be flagged by Respondus?
So if you have it checked where they, you know, where you're not where they can use external resources, and you have it, you know, you have it unchecked, that one where it's not, if they're looking down using paper, you know, that's not going to flag anything in Respondus, because, you know, you have unchecked it. So that way it's not continually asking them. And then you can go ahead and have it set up in Canvas, where then they'll scan it and upload that assignment for you, or, you know, however you have typically done it in the past.
Okay, so that won't bother Respondus, like if they scan something and send it to their computer and...
No, and it may be that they have to do that after they get out of Respondus.
Okay.
You know, so that's a good one that we'll have to see how that works as well.
Yeah, the one thing I would say is in your setup instructions, you're going to want to, you know, those alternate directions that where you can edit the text. You're going to want to make sure that you put in there, you know, that they can have their phone for the purpose of scanning that one thing and then sending it to their computer. you'll also mention you'll have this piece of paper that you have to work on. And then in the setting there, in the setup instructions of the environment check, you can give them specific directions for, you know, have your phone to the left of your computer, have the paper to the right of your computer. So you can give them those kinds of very specific instructions. That way, when you're looking at their video, if it does flag it, you're going to be able to jump to that spot it flagged, and you can tell very quickly, oh, they're just trying to upload their document, and then just move on. So when it flags it, it doesn't do anything more other than give you a place to look at what's going on with that student. And then you decide, is this a problem or not?
Okay.
And go from there.
Okay. Thanks.
All right, Julia.
Yeah. So we also have some tips for instructors on this that we put together. And like Hope said, you're going to get links to all these, so you'll have all these documents we're sharing with you. This is something new for our students. It's new for us. It's new for our students. And anytime you have something new like this, there's always a learning curve. So we encourage you to try to give some time to that learning curve so that you can get used to this process and your students can get used to it as well. Get to know Canvas quizzes. This works through Canvas. So your test needs to be put into Canvas. And so it's really important that you're familiar with how those quizzes work in Canvas. So I want to mention about Canvas quizzes at this point because there are two different quiz engines in Canvas. One labeled classic quizzes, one that's labeled new quizzes. Now, if you're someone who's been going into your course and clicking on where it says quizzes in the course menu and just creating your quiz from there, then you're probably using classic quizzes. In order to use new quizzes, you have to actually turn that on in your settings. So to turn on new quizzes in that course menu list, you would go to settings, and then you would go to feature options, and then you would turn on new quizzes. Okay. There are these two different quiz engines because the new quizzes is a little bit updated. There are some different question types that you can put into your tests in Canvas. Also, in Canvas quizzes, and we ran into this last week, is that let's say while somebody's taking your test, their internet goes out, right? So what it does is Canvas sees that in classic quizzes as an attempt at the test, okay? Even if they didn't finish it, they've started it, so it sees it as an attempt. Well, in classic quizzes, there's no option for you to be able to reopen that attempt to students so they can pick up where they left off. Instead, what you have to do is add an additional attempt, and then they have to start over on it. In new quizzes, then if that same scenario happened, there's this option for you to be able to open the quiz where they left off so that they can just then go from there, okay? So those are two differences with it, as well as the different kinds of questions that you can do with new quizzes. Now, if you already have your test made and you did it by clicking on quizzes in the course menu and then just building it from there, then you've probably already built it in classic quizzes. And once it's built, it's not like you can then go back and apply new quizzes to it. So you have to have made that choice in your settings prior to building the quiz. Because when you start a quiz and this is enabled, one of the things that comes up is, do you want to use classic quizzes or new quizzes? And you have to choose. So wanted to say all that because it makes a difference for how students start their test with the lockdown browser. So with Canvas Classic quizzes, students have to open the lockdown browser on their computer that they've already downloaded and installed. Then once they open that lockdown browser, log into Canvas, and then go to your quiz. With new quizzes, they can just go to Canvas and regular old Google, like they've been, maybe Chrome or whatever they've been using, go to your quiz, and then once they start the quiz, it prompts them to start the lockdown browser. So that's a very nuanced difference, but it's important because this is where we have found students getting confused, is their instructor set up a quiz in Canvas using classic quizzes, but what they did to try to access it was just go to regular Chrome, log into Canvas, and try to do the quiz that way. And they ended up in this little kind of what they consider to be a loop that they couldn't get out of. Because what it does when you do that, if you've done classic quizzes and a student goes to Chrome and tries to start the quiz, it gives them a screen for them to download Lockdown Browser and install it. But we need to ask students to do that on the front end to install the Lockdown Browser. So if they've already taken the step to install the Lockdown Browser on their computer and they're accessing a classic quiz, but they do it by going to regular Chrome, they're going to get confused because they still get the screen that tells them to download Lockdown Browser when they know they've already done it. Does that make sense? So this can be a confusing thing for students. And one of the things that we really want to encourage you on is to communicate clearly to students how they need to start the quiz. If you built your test in classic quizzes, they need to start the Lockdown Browser. Log into Canvas that way through the Lockdown Browser, and then go to your quiz. Now, also on the screen, you will see that there's a specific link for them to use to download Lockdown Browser. Students cannot get to that link just by Googling it, Lockdown Browser on the internet. It's not out there. Respondus doesn't have it on their website because that link is specific to Lipscomb University. So you need to communicate that link to your students ahead of time so they know how they're supposed to be able to download the Lockdown Browser and install it on their computer. Also note that right above there on that screen, on that document, are the system requirements for the students' devices. So you'll see it has Windows, it has Mac, it has iPad. It does not have Chromebook. So will not work on Chromebook. Currently it doesn't. That's something that the company's working on coming. So we're hoping that's coming down the pike for next semester. But right now it doesn't. So they need to use, excuse me, a Windows computer, a Mac computer, or they need to use an iPad to be able to access that. I am going to pause here, Hope, and see what questions people have about that. Yes, go ahead. Unmute yourself.
So do students, is that pretty intuitive going, so they don't go to Canvas and click Lockdown Browser, they go into some.
They're starting Lockdown Browser software on their computer.
Okay, but, and they start that apart from Canvas.
Right, they double click on that software to start it, and then they go to Canvas to log in.
So is that pretty intuitive for them? Have you found that to be pretty intuitive for students? This is all about my freshmen. My other classes I'm not worried about, but it's sort of mentoring my freshmen, and so that's my concern.
Well, this is one reason why we say start early, because students need to practice this, right? So one of the recommendations that we have is actually, this is something that was already mentioned, do a practice quiz with your students. The purpose of that practice quiz is so they can go through those steps and see how it works. And if there's any issues on their end, that can get, those issues can be worked on and resolved before your test. So a practice quiz would require them to stay in, working for at least 5 minutes so they get the full experience. But it can be something, like you give them a part of the honor code and then ask them questions about it if you want to. So it can be something very simple. Something like that with the honor code is meaningful because you need them to be considering those things as you're coming up to the test, but not make it worth a lot of points at all, because that way it's more low stakes, and the whole purpose is to work out any bugs they would have. So as far as is that intuitive, you're going to have to specifically tell them how to start their test. So they won't know unless you tell them to start the lockdown browser first, then go to Canvas, then do your test. They won't know that unless you tell them that.
Yeah.
So that communication piece is huge. Go ahead, Hope.
Yeah, there's on that main page when you get there, the getting started, number 2. So if you're using classic quizzes, it comes up with, these two, I'm using Lockdown Browser and the webcam, and it comes down with some information that you can copy and paste and share with students. This is typically stuff that you would have in your syllabus at the beginning of the semester, but since Respondus was after we submitted our syllabi, but this would be something that you would do in communication. And I would, this part right here about, webcam, like some of this stuff, you can delete out the red that's in there, what you need to do, but it, okay, I'm using the classic quizzes, lockdown and webcam, and it gives you there's that specific Lipscomb link as well. And then it tells you start lockdown, log into Canvas, navigate to the quiz. So it gives you that communication piece to help you share with students what they need to do. And, one of the things with the classic versus the new quizzes, there's not one that's better than the other. If you've been using classic quizzes, keep using classic quizzes. What Canvas does is they beta test any new feature, which I do appreciate that they do. They don't just launch something brand new without notification. So that way they can see how people are using the new quizzes and stuff. So, but yeah, so either I'm using new classic quizzes, or I'm using new quizzes. And then the new quiz is a little bit different because you can see that link is not there for them to download because it's launching right within Canvas. Yeah, I was going to pull up the rest of our tips here. Julia, let's see.
Yeah, so we also, these are some of the things that we've already talked about on this. The preview that Hope showed you, I really want to highly encourage you to click that link to preview that startup sequence, because that really gets you a sense for how your students are going to have to get started with this. You want to encourage your students to read the information that comes up on each of those steps carefully as they get started. The practice quiz we just talked about. Also, being able to do the practice quiz with enough time in between that and when you're going to do your test is important, because that gives more time to be able to troubleshoot issues students may be having. And then the link that Hope talked about, there's that option to be able to put a domain in there so that students can go to an external resource, but it being on the web. So if you need to link to a website for one of your test questions, you need them to have access to that. You need to be sure and put that URL in that particular setting. So those are just some of the other tips that we had for you guys. We just talked about how important communication is. So we also have some tips for students. And we've put this document together, and you're going to have access to this. This takes your students through what are those system requirements for me to be able to access my test. The fact that they need to have access to a webcam is important. If they don't have access, it tells them that there are computers in the library. The Apple computers in the library have the Respondus monitor and the Respondus lockdown browser loaded on them so that they can go to the library and take your test if they need to. The Lipscomb specific link is on this document as well. It tells them, make sure you know how you're supposed to get to your test, and that the instructors will give them specific information as to how to start that test. Take the test in an area that's free of distraction. You may, you'll be asked to show your surroundings through the webcam. So make sure that you're in an area conducive to that. Read all instructions carefully. And then what do they do if they have a technical problem? One of the great things about this, I think, is that once they start a test with the Respondus lockdown browser being enabled, then there's a link that shows up to them for help from Respondus company if they need technical help. So it's a 24/7 live chat type of help for them. And they can use that as they're doing their test. Also, our IT help desk is very helpful if they run into difficulties as well. Only they're, with the way our IT help desk is, they actually need a little bit of time to be able to manage. So it's been really helpful for those instructors who have done a practice quiz, realized some students had some problems accessing things, and then those students had time to go to the help desk to allow them to help them get that result before they had to take their test. So Hope, is there anything else you wanted to add there?
Because with the help, like the issues that we saw that IT was able to help with last week included things of like students didn't have the correct, they hadn't updated their computer or, their operating system. And so the help desk was able to kind of troubleshoot some of those things beforehand. And the other thing that I would recommend, just from some of the experiences we've had working with some other professors, because a lot of students, they we're all using Respondus this semester, and so they've already downloaded it. They may have already used it in a class. If you do a practice quiz, let them know that they need to go ahead and do the practice quiz for your particular class to make sure that you can see that they are able to utilize it with the device that they're going to be using in your class. And one of the examples that we ran into was a professor gave a practice quiz, but only like half of the students actually took the practice quiz, and the responses were like, well, I've already used it for another class. And so he was like, no, I want to make sure that you're ready to go for my test that's coming up. So I want to be able, which is why giving that time between a practice and an actual test is really helpful. We've had some professors who they've done the practice test in the actual physical classroom. So that way they have students bring their devices and they launch the practice test when class starts, 5-10 minutes at the beginning of class, just to make sure that everything's working. And then if something's not working, then you need to go over to the IT help desk in the basement of the library for them to be able to help you.
So I've got, I think, 3 questions. Number one, once you download the lockdown browser link for a test? Do you have to download it with each quiz or test, or you just do it once and it's on your device?
Just once and it's on your device. Mhm.
Okay, so you could actually have them do that like the first day of class so that everybody has it on their device, right?
Right. And that's probably something like if we continue to use this for future semesters, probably like during new student orientation, like for all new freshmen coming in, like there will be a time, like and it'll be an assignment for them to go ahead and download it onto their device. Mhm.
Second thing, does it matter which web browser they use? Like does Lockdown Browser and Canvas work with any web browser, Firefox, Chrome, Windows Explorer, Internet Explorer? As far as you know, is it working with all those browsers?
Lockdown Browser is a browser, so it takes the place of all those.
Okay,
Yeah, so that doesn't matter
so
because
it doesn't matter. Okay.
right. Yeah, because they're going to be launching that Lockdown browser and they're going to be going into Canvas through that.
Okay.
Mhm.
And the third thing is, you know, what I've noticed is with Zoom, kids are using their phones a lot. And I mean, it would work, I guess, with an iPhone, but I'm assuming it wouldn't work with an Android phone because an iPhone runs the same operating system as a iPad does, and actually as a Mac computer does. So I'm assuming that Android phones for sure, but you're saying iPhones won't work either?
No, no mobile devices will. In fact, the only tablet they've said is iPad. So, you know, even if they have like a Surface tablet or something like that, it's not going to work.
Well, a Surface tablet is a different operating system, but
Right,
an
but I'm just
iPhone,
saying,
an
this
iPhone
is
and an
what-
iPad work off the same operating system.
I understand that, but the company has told us that it will not work with anything other than a Mac computer, a Windows computer, and an iPad.
So your recommendation, and that would be mine, is don't use your phone.
Right.
Don't
Yeah.
try your phone. But
Right.
I noticed that a lot of kids Zoom on their phones. You know, I mean, they're Zooming from their cars. They're Zooming from the bathroom, it looks like. So, but yeah, okay.
Yeah, and we just actually saw one of the ones from the library that it's an app that was downloaded onto that particular thing. So it will not download onto an iPhone, like the app will not download onto an iPhone, only to an iPad. And of course, then it's only going to work for students if you check that setting that you will allow an iPad. Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm. Great questions. Other questions?
Oh, one other thing. So if I want to watch them take the test, how do I do that? Or am I capable of doing that?
So the only way that you're capable of doing that is if you actually have some of them in the classroom taking the test during the test. Other than that, you can't actually go in, because I was reading up on that earlier on one of their FAQs. So as a professor, because they're using the AI proctoring to go in, and we can't actually go in and watch them live. It'll be whenever it's processed, the results is that you.
So do you guys have and it may be too early for this, do you have a best practices on discriminating between when it flags, you know, motion or movement versus discriminating about, oh yeah, that's definitely cheating? Is there a best practice? I mean, maybe we don't have enough experience yet, but you know, I could see just from what I've heard from people that, you know, there's some things students could do that really isn't cheating, but it may flag like it is. Do you guys have any thoughts? Because you've used it probably way more than most of us. Do you have any thoughts about, yeah, you know, here are some best practices to look for or not?
So we haven't, but looking at the way that the results come back to you, which we'll get the recording that Respondus did talking about analyzing the results later, it flags just specific pieces And so you can literally click on it and kind of see, like, is that something I should be concerned about? You know, so like if I'm taking it, all of a sudden somebody else comes in here and sits down and I'm talking to this person, and, you know, and then the person's like pointing and telling me stuff, then yeah, that's something that I'm going to have concern. But it could be something, let's say that they took the exam in the library, and someone walked behind, because it's on that row of computers, someone walked behind them as they were taking the exam, and you could tell like it was not going to be impacted. Then that's probably something that I was like, okay, you know, that happened.
A little depends on your test, I think. I know with math tests, we get a ton of flags for not being able to see their face. And you just have to look at them. They're just looking down at their paper. You know, they are still writing for us. There's still a lot of writing. It is not happening on the computer. And so you just have to kind of use some discretion and talk to them about where you want the computer angled.
I guess my main concern would be that they have a second device and
Right.
they're looking up answers, Googling answers, have the slides that I've given them, you know, in that second device. Like right now, I'm looking at the camera and out of my peripheral vision, I can pull up the slides and I can just slide my eyes over to look up an answer. And I'm assuming the artificial intelligence wouldn't pick that up, versus if I went like this, it probably would. So that's what
I'm
I'm sorry.
sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just saying, that's why they have the environment check piece. And that's why we encourage you to keep that in that startup sequence, because then they take their computer and that has their webcam and they show you everything that's around them. And then that way you can know that they don't have a second device.
Yeah, another thing that I know some people did, like when we went remote in the spring semester, was that they would have students kind of hold up their cell phone and then have the students place the cell phone like behind them as well.
Right.
And so that could be in kind of some of those startup instructions as well. And it will not work on like external monitors. It will only work on the one. So they can't, you know, have an external monitor. It's going to flag as well, because they were actually, when we did the demo, they were showing us and they're like, oh no, it's not going to work. I can't remember if it was the demo with our team or if it was the Respondus webinar that I attended that Respondus did. And she was like, see, it's not working because I have an external monitor here. But we have those who are, you know, if they would spend as much time actually studying as they are trying to get out of stuff, I was like, man, be nice.
Well, I think I'm a conspiracy theorist. You know, if there's a way that they can cheat, they'll do it and they'll find out how to beat the system.
Yeah.
So we have to try to be smarter than they are, which I'm never smarter than they are. So that's why I was curious with, I guess with experience and there again, best practices, that will help over time.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think anybody is going to say that this is 100% guarantee they're not going to cheat at all. But I do think that once students know we have this, that it can be a big deterrent for those. And you're still going to have that small percentage of people that still try to find a way.
Yeah, I'm a true crime junkie myself. And so, you know, I have in my mind how I would get away with some of these crimes myself, but I've never actually tried it. So, yeah. Any other questions? One of the things that we talked about is, you know, after we've had some people go through is of kind of pulling together some folks of kind of sharing their experiences and what's worked really well, just so we can at Lipscomb kind of also have some of those best practices as well with each other and building our, you know, collaboration across campus as well. So
Is it okay if I ask just a Canvas quiz question?
Sure.
Because over the summer, I was able to find a place where I could say moderate this quiz, and I could give a student extra time.
Hmm.
But I don't seem to find that anymore.
So are
And
you in classic quizzes or new
I'm
quizzes?
in classic quizzes.
Okay. Yeah, so this is a class, let's see, let me make sure. Actually, let me go into, yeah, this is a classic quiz. Should be, I think. Well, let me double check this one.
You can tell by the icon.
Oh, can you?
Yep, you
Okay.
can. So the ones that are clear, those are classic. The filled in one is the new quizzes.
Well, see, I learned something new today. That's my free gift with purchase today. All right, so here's a classic one. And then, so edit. No, maybe it's because this one's not published. Let me go to the other one.
Yeah, it has to be published.
Okay, this one's published. Yeah, I know this one is. When you go into it, it should be over here on the right-hand side, moderate this quiz.
Yeah, so it's before you actually click edit. I know somebody else was looking for it once they clicked edit on the quiz, but it's actually before you click edit.
Right. So when you go into that piece, it should be on the right-hand side.
But it won't show up if it's not published yet.
Hmm.
So you don't get to moderate, you don't get that moderate this quiz option when it's not published.
Okay, that may have been my problem, is that I was trying to moderate it before I published it. So,
And this is where if you needed to go back in and give like, you know, extra attempts, you could, you know, as well.
okay, but that will automatically, Respondus will know to let the student have extra time and all of
Yes.
that. Okay,
All of that is managed through Canvas. So
Okay.
that part of it is not, doesn't actually go through Respondus at all.
So for those that you're not, you've never done this before where you've given extended time, then you can, you know, go into the moderate this quiz, click on the little pencil. And then right now, everyone got 15 minutes for this quiz, but if I wanted to give double time, let's say that this student got double time, then I could save it and then it would tell you. You can tell I keep giving people more time as I demonstrate how to use this.
That is also where you can, in classic quizzes, like if a student's Wi-Fi goes out and you need to give them an additional attempt, that's where you can do that too.
Any other questions? Like I said, I'll follow up with you all with a copy of the recording for this and then access to these handouts that we've created for you all. So thank you all so much for jumping on here this afternoon, and hopefully these recommendations will help you as you are, as we're co-learning together about Respondus. So,
Thank you, guys. Well
Thank you.
done.
thank you.
Thanks, guys.